Michael J.
So many new cards from the new set. What's got you excited?
Dude, well, there's a lot, but it seems to me there's only one reasonable place to start, and that's kind of the talk of the town. Heliod, man. Heliod, the Sun Crowned, is that tuna white enchantment god, and this is the one that, Elspeth tried to kill before, but you don't just kill these indestructible gods. So Heliod's tuna white, 5/5 indestructible. As long as your devotion to white is less than 5, Heliod isn't a creature. So you need 5 white devotion to get this enchantment to turn into a 5/5 indestructible. But it does have 2 other abilities when it's just enchantment mode. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or an enchantment you control. And that enchantment part is relevant because it lets you put +1/+1 counters on things such as itself that are not yet creatures but could be later. And then the other ability is 1 white, another target creature gains lifelink until end of turn.
Yeah, this card is wild, right? It's priced to move, and it's hyper synergistic with the other stuff in the set. Like, I mean, even that Daxos we were talking about before, it's just like so perfectly paired with that card. It's perfectly paired with a stack of things that might not even be creatures. And it's just so good, right, to turn on itself.
So, yeah, I mean, so it's got some powerful, almost like Thassa similarities at one level, just like straight up. And then it's synergistic with stuff in the set. And then what's more, it's part of a combo in Pioneer and above that really has people talking. And the most basic version of the combo is Walking Ballista plus Heliod. So if you have Walking Ballista plus Heliod, what you can do is you put out Heliod on 3 and you're just playing whatever game. But then when you have on the next turn, you spend 4 mana and you make a 2/2 Walking Ballista, or you could just wait until turn 6. But you have to play a Walking Ballista for at least 2, and then give it lifelink. And if you do this, you'll be able to remove a +1/+1 counter, shoot whatever you want. Your Walking Ballista will have lifelink, and because you'll gain a life from shooting something, you'll get to put a +1/+1 counter on something, so you put it on the Ballista. And then you can just repeat this, and obviously you just loop to win the game.
Wow, holy tooth and nail, Batman. I mean, people used to spend 9 mana and have really esoteric cards in their deck to accomplish the same thing, right? Here we have 2 excellent cards individually that allow you to infinitely mess up opponents and or their battlefields while gaining theoretically infinite life.
And, I mean, in theory, if you don't need it to all happen in one turn, like if you're playing against somebody who's just goldfishing or doesn't have a lot of interaction, you can go turn 3 Heliod, turn 4 Walking Ballista, turn 5, kill them. Right? So, like, you couldn't space it out over 3 different turns if you want, even though it's just 2 cards.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're talking about Modern, for example, right now Modern's got so many decks that they just got a lot of creatures and nobody's playing. I'm not nobody, but relatively few people are playing a lot of dedicated point removal. So if you play out a Heliod or you play out a Walking Ballista, you just have a reasonable chance of untapping with it the next turn.
Well, I mean, Heliod's an indestructible card that isn't even a creature unless you get a lot of devotion. So the odds that somebody's actually even going to be able to get rid of Heliod is quite low. The Walking Ballista is the much more fragile part, which is part of the reason why I think if you just want to sort of do the combo, it's pretty reliable to just stick Heliod in play. And then on turn 6, play Walking Ballista and do it all in one big turn. But there are other things you can do. It's part of the advantage to that core of the combo is not that it's the cheapest, fastest combo kill there is. It's that both Heliod and Walking Ballista are fabulous cards. It's just you can just play Heliod in your deck. And you can just play Walking Ballista in your deck, and they're just both good cards. So the fact that you just have access to this infinite combo is quite attractive. But there are a couple other cards if you actually want to be combo-rific. If you want to be like really doing it, there are a couple cards that have some powerful synergies with these cards. Most notably, what is it? The Ardor. The white 1-cost instant. It's never been. It's Mortal's Ardor. So Mortal's Ardor is a ostensibly limited combat trick that for one, it just costs a white, and it gives target creature +1/+1 and lifelink this turn. So what this lets you do is instead of needing 6 mana to play Walking Ballista and give it lifelink all in one turn, you actually only need 3. You can play Heliod on turn 3, and even if you don't have another land, you can just play a Ballista for 1. Like, you spend 2 mana, but you put 1 counter on it instead of needing 2. Then you spend your last mana to give it +1/+1 in lifelink. So now you can remove the 1/+1/+1 counter that's on there, and you'll get it going. Normally you need 2 counters, because if you just pull the only counter off, it'll die. But with Mortal's Ardor, if you pull the counter off, it'll live, and it already takes care of the lifelink part, which is just a dramatic savings of mana.
Yeah, so the Heliod in this case just acts as like a Fires of Yavimaya type thing, right? It's just like a straight enchantment enabler that's giving it kind of a static ability.
Well, it's not even. Yeah, I don't know. The Fires of Yavimaya example is a little confusing to me. It's much more just about having the a variation of Archangel of Thune's ability. Like, we've seen a lot of infinite combos with Archangel of Thune, but Archangel of Thune normally costs 5 and isn't indestructible. So it's just a lot more interactable. That said, you can actually play Archangel of Thune alongside these cards.
Wait, hold up. How does Spike Feeder work? Speaking of Archangel of Thune, like, you can't just Collected Company, Heliod, and Spike Feeder into play, can you? Heliod's not a creature unless I don't even know. How does that work?
You can't. Yeah, so Heliod is a creature card. Yeah, so Heliod's ability where it stops being a creature is only relevant when it's on the battlefield. When it's in your deck, it counts as a creature card, so you can go get it with things that get creature cards, like Court of Calling or whatever, Eldamari's Call. So in Modern, you can do an infinite life combo with Heliod and Spike Feeder if you want.
Oh, I love it. I love just Cocoing for that.
But in Pioneer, you can actually do the Walking Ballista Heliod combo is really exciting in Pioneer, just because Pioneer has so little interaction that can break up combos. And, obviously there's a lot of crazy combos in Modern. But in Pioneer, the fact that there are it's pretty crazy, the implications. I mean, even the Modern thing's pretty fast, though. It's not like Infinite Life beats everybody, but that's pretty intense, right?
I mean, that seems. Infinite Life seems fantastic to me. Like, obviously, it's not great against people who are milling you out. It's not great against Infect. Doesn't automatically beat every control deck. But if you could just nail Infinite Life on the 3rd turn using cards that are actually still pretty good, I like it.
Yeah. So this is definitely a powerhouse in the Pioneer space. The two first, the first ways that kind of pop into mind. The first way is kind of just like an actual white devotion deck. And I think you can do this at least one of a couple ways. One possibility is if you want to play like a Soul Sisters kind of thing, you can play Serra Ascendant, Sacred Cat, Ajani Pridemate, Walking Ballista, Heliod, Gideon Blackblade, Archangel of Thune, Mortal's Ardor, Cast Out, Castle Ardenvale, Zalfir. There's like a bunch of stuff. So basically, if you have Gideon Blackblade on the battlefield, you can use it lets you combo a turn faster. It's not even a turn faster, I should say, but with less mana, right? Like, you can actually, if you have Gideon already, because both Gideon and Heliod are the type of permanents that are much more likely to live than the average creature. And if you've just got them on the battlefield, you could drop the Ballista for 4 and give it lifelink immediately.
I mean, can you also do stuff like maybe a Johnny's Welcome, right? If you wanted to do it for 4, again, same theme, just being faster. I think that people might want to, if you're on the subject of Soul Sisters, right? Like a Soul Warden type ability. If you played a a 2-mana Walking Ballista, trigger the ability to gain 1 life immediately. You can put that counter onto the Walking Ballista and then use your remaining 2 mana to activate Heliod, right? Like that's also a shortcut, I assume?
Yeah, or you can use the Daxos or whatever his name is, right? Because if you just play Daxos on turn 2, Heliod on 3, then on turn 4, when you play Walking Ballista, you could spend just 2 mana, play the Walking Ballista, put the counter on it from the life you gain from Daxos, and then give it lifelink, and you're off to the races.
It seems like a pretty sweet deck, actually. Like, it will mess up certain opponents pretty bad. Like, people who are adherent to mono red aggro. A lot of like fair creature decks are just going to be swallowed up by this, even if they don't go off infinite style. Like just the huge toughness on Daxos, the indestructibility on the god there, and then just probably pretty good combat creatures with a little bit of life gain to help race. That seems like a pretty solid kind of put together for fair opponents, and then the ability to go off and gain infinite life or to deal infinite damage as early as turn 4 seems a pretty compelling thing in Goldfish games.
There's definitely. There's some other options too, though. If you want to, like Archangel of Thune with Walking Ballista can actually combo with that Mortal's Hour Door, giving you a chance to actually combo off without even needing Heliod. Right? Like you might just be in some game where obviously Archangel of Thune is a pretty intense permanent anyway, but the fact that you have that combo available anyway is kind of interesting. And then Cast Out is pretty excellent removal, but it's also just really cool that you can get your 5th Devotion instant speed to wake up Heliod to surprise block something.
Oh, that's cool.
And then obviously Ajani's Pride Mate, if you end up going that route, is pretty sweet with Daxos. The way that all the different pieces spiderweb together, there's another part of it. I wonder, does Mox Amber, I mean, maybe it doesn't, but is there any chance that Mox Amber has a home here? It works with Gideon Blackblade. It works with Heliod Suncrowned. It works with Daxos. So in theory, and maybe you need one more somewhere, but in theory, if you just went, if you play Daxos on 2, the fact that, I guess it doesn't really speed you up though, does it?
I mean, I'd just be more worried about the volatility, right?
Sure.
Like you're talking about a deck that doesn't even need to do things in a very particular order, depending on which plan it's going after. But this is not the kind of deck that's really good at deciding which cards it draws in which order. And I think Mox Amber either you have like a lot of redundancy in the first couple of turns, or you have those kinds of features in order for it to be giving you a lot of leverage.
Well, so Daxos, Walking Ballista, Heliod, and then I don't know if you play if you end up playing Gideon, Heliod, Walking Ballista, Daxos. That's already 16 for Board the Weatherlight, if you want to go that route.
That seems expensive to me. I feel like just like isn't it a race to get to I don't know. Maybe I'm just spoiled by Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, I mean, Board the Weatherlight is not as good as Once Upon a Time. That's true. Some other possibilities, depending on what you're into. If you want to play black, Sorin Vengeful Bloodlord does some interesting things. First of all, it's static. Its passive ability just gives your creature's lifelink on your turn, so you can it's another way to give your ballista lifelink. Like you could, in theory, just go if you have Sorin already, you can save the 2 mana that you would need to spend on giving your ballista lifelink. Well, you could go Heliod into Sorin.
There's another angle on this, which is just if you just look at the double redundancy, like in kind of the card selection, Heliod and Sorin are both lifelink enablers. Archangel of Thune and Heliod are both +1/+1 counter enablers. Right? So obviously the rawest combination is just Heliod plus Walking Ballista, but I just like the fact that you can assemble maybe not the exact same combo, but like similar angles on combinations using some of the cards you're talking about just from a redundancy perspective, right? So, there's also stuff like maybe there's combat, like maybe you don't actually need to use the Walking Ballista, right? Like you could just play the Walking Ballista and then attack with a lifelink creature, right? You gain life whether or not the creature lives, which now puts a +1/+1 counter on the Walking Ballista, and then you can go off that way, right? Instead of having to, have a 2/2 Walking Ballista and then have lifelink, right? You'd have that's just another opportunity. Like, and I think that if you have a bunch of these cards that are doing multiple things, like just what we were talking about a second ago, Daxos is kind of a soul sister, and if you were going to have any one of those one casting cost Soul Warden-esque enchantments and or creatures, those are just redundancies against the same kind of concept, which again, with Heliod in play, would be helpful to setting up that Walking Ballista.
It definitely seems like Walking Ballista is the bottleneck. Like, there's a lot of different versions of a lot of the other effects, but there's not really a good alternative to Walking Ballista.
I mean, it's
for Pioneer,
for Pioneer. I think if you're going to extend this to Modern, if I were, I don't know. I think if you were going to go mono white, which is a total possibility based on the cards that you laid out, these are pretty good cards, and you could get some aggro out of them. But I think that if I were going to play a deck that, even if it had a flexible otherwise game, I think I'd be very inclined to try to play Spike Feeder. Spike Feeder Heliod or Spike Feeder Archangel of Thune are self-contained combos.
Does Whip of Erebos do anything for you? That's another way to get lifelink.
Oh my gosh, the classic Whip of Erebos. I mean, that was such a dangerous permanent in Standard 5 years ago when we started this podcast.
It's kind of interesting.
I mean, now that Erebos is coming back, maybe his Whip is coming back. I don't know. What do you think for Pioneer? I think I would Sorin before I Whip of Erebos. But
would you ever play a mix?
Sorin and Whip of Erebos and Heal? Maybe.
I mean, Sorin also is kind of interesting in getting back stuff. If you end up playing any of the Ajani's Pride Mate action, you get some extra value. But I don't imagine it comes up that often. But Whip of Erebos definitely could be sweet with Archangel of Thune.
I mean, Whip of Erebos is. I mean, so Whip of Erebos is one of those cards that, first of all, it's 4 mana with double black pips. So start there for a second. There are going to be tons of opponents in whatever formats you're talking about that don't care that you have a Whip of Erebos in play, and then about the rest of the room is going to be devastated by the fact that you have a Whip of Erebos in play. Right? This is it's a pretty extreme card from that perspective. Would you agree?
I mean, they're not going to care that much, the people who don't care, but they care a little, because at the end of the day, you can still do some stuff with Whip of Erebos.
I guess they
like
have.
Either you're. Like, what are they going to do? Let you do it? Like, if you whip an Archangel of Thune, you're kind of doing it. Yeah. But Thoughtseize obviously seems like it could be a great way to help force this combo through. This is definitely the kind of combo that it's a lot better to, if you're going to use some sort of interaction, it's a lot better to use discard rather than something like permission.
Why do you think that? I mean, I don't know.
Just being proactive, spending your mana, because the fact that this combo already sort of implies that you have to spend so much mana in one turn to do it in your normal cases. It's nice to be able to preemptively use a discard spell in order to clear the way rather than needing to wait an extra turn or two to protect it.
I agree. So you use your otherwise would have been unspent mana to Thoughtseize or Duress the opponent, take their answer away, and then use your follow-up mana to beat them, right? Instead of when you're using permission, outside of, free spell permission, you kind of need to have like an extra 2 mana at least to cover on the same turn.
As far as the double black of stuff up with Erebos, that's no problem at all in Pioneer. When you got Shambling Vent, Godless Shrine, Isolated Chapel, Concealed Courtyard, it'll be no problem. It'll be no problem at all. I don't. I mean, obviously you could play it, but I don't think Elspeth Sun's Nemesis is really appropriate for this deck. There's just too many other appealing 4 and 5 cost options, and its ability to gain life is just so not the part of the like that's part of the card, but most of the power of Elspeth is all the value, and this deck is circumventing that entire type of game. You know?
Well, I think it depends. Now that you mention it, I'm thinking maybe it might be appropriate, maybe not for plan A, but in sideboard or something else.
Well, yeah, that's where I was going with this. It seems like Elspeth could be a good backup plan.
Like, depends on build, right? Like, if you're going to go with let's say a mono white version, which is kind of what you were talking about with Soul Sisters, or just the initial description of Walking Ballista and Heliod, you have a deck that's like, all right, I have a combo engine, but I also have a beatdown plan. It might not be like the fastest beatdown deck, but I have a respectable attack deck as well as a fast combo deck. And when you go to the black-white deck, now you have a deck that, you know, you have your combo, potential multiple combo engines, and then also some ability to grind. But I do think that if you're playing this strategy, your deck needs to be able to do more than one thing, unlike some other, you know, more dedicated combo decks like Storm combo decks, etc. Because, like, I'm not going to do a great job of describing this. I feel like these kinds of decks are so much more susceptible to being disrupted by decks like Jund than dedicated combo decks.
Well, part of it is that if you're playing with lots of combo pieces instead of lots of tutors, and a lot of your combo pieces, they're not dedicated. They're like solid beaters anyway. And part of the value you're getting is that even when you're on the backup plan, you've got some quality cards. That's exactly the spot where you normally would expect to be on the backup plan a lot. It's like those collected company combo decks in Modern. Very frequently you're on the backup plan because that's part of what you're paying for, is the fact that you operate on the backup plan so well.
Swinging with 2 kitchen finks, yeah? Yeah, I think, like, when you're talking about a deck like Storm Combo, for example, first of all, their combo pieces are relatively few permanents, right? Like, they might have a Goblin Electromancer or the equivalent in play, which is a potentially attractive target, but they can go off without any non-land permanents in play. This kind of a deck, if you're going to go off, you need to have probably 2 key permanents in play, which makes it eminently disruptible depending on what the opponent's got, right? So obviously you can't very easily, you know, like double lightning bolt a Heliod or something, but you can bolt the heck out of a Walking Ballista.
Yeah, you do a lot of things to a small ballista. Actually, on the topic of white devotion, does Birth of Miletus do anything for you? This is the enchantment saga, 1 and a white. Chapter 1, when you play it, search your library for a basic land and put it into your hands, shuffle your library. Which is kind of an interesting effect on a white card, right?
Yeah.
And then chapter 2, you get a 0/4 defender artifact creature token. And then chapter 3, you get 2 life. Ding.
And this card is only 1 and a white. I think this card's fantastic. I would not be surprised, because the version that we're seeing is, I believe, Japanese. I bet it that Chapter 1 is a basic plains, not a basic land. I'd gamble it right now.
Really?
Yeah, I would. I don't think that straight white it's common that we get to get all kinds of different basic lands.
True.
But there's many cases that we see straight white able to get a plains. Or just a plains or a forest, for example, but never, I mean, you've never getting island before, right? Never getting mountain before. So first of all, regardless, we're not 100% sure what this text is.
No, I'm telling you, man, it's basic land.
I think this card is awesome either way. I mean, first of all, 2 mana, 0/4 defender for 2 mana it's up everybody's alley if you attach the text draw a card, right? Like that's just Wall of Blossoms, Wall of Omens. And this card has got that, draw a particular card being a land, and you also gain 2 life. This card's awesome. I think this card is going to be a staple in decks that care about board control, right? Do
you think it's roughly comparable to Wall of Omens in power level?
I think that it's... Yeah, I'd say roughly, yeah. It's less synergistic with, like, tricks. Like, you can't easily just put, like, I can't remember who did it, but they put a Splinter Twin on their Wall of Omens and then just won I don't remember if won the Pro Tour, but, like...
Yeah, but the thing is, it's synergistic with lots of other stuff. There's so many enchantment synergies.
Yeah, but the effects are slow. So making the 04 Defender is Chapter 2. So I think, on average, if you're going to get 2 to 3 turns out of this, it's better than Wall of Omens. But yeah, that's not a surprise to anybody.
Out of this, who's stopping you?
I'm just making the caveat, Patrick. Like, if you get...
You're saying if the game ends, like, you're dead?
No, I'm just saying if you just get the full value of all 3 chapters, this card's better than Wall of Omens. But if you don't, then Wall of Omens is better. But that's not a controversial statement.
It is to me. I disagree with it. I think Wall of Omens is better than this card. I just think this card, if it's good, I think if you just do it straight up, Wall of Omens is better.
Yeah.
I think that I think the ability to block 1 turn late is like, it seems somewhat unlikely that that's worth the 2 life you get at the end. Like, I'd rather have the card immediately to block with. So they're at least comparable there. And then as far as, like, getting a basic land or drawing a card, I want to draw a card. Once I am already spending 2 mana, I think that it's not that far off. But to me, I think this card becomes better than Wall of Omens if you're taking advantage of the enchantment synergies. Either way, that's not the comparison. Not everything's about Wall of Omens, But
well, I mean, even if it is, this is the only legal Wall of Omens that we know about for Standard right now. So I think this card is great. I can't wait to play this card in decks that care about blocking. I think that you have a good point, which is that the fact that the 0/4 Defender creature appears a turn late is probably not fully counterbalanced by gaining 2 life. Right? Like if all it did was block a 3-power creature, for example, which Wall of Omens or Wall of Blossoms or whoever would often do, that's simply more life than you're gaining back in Chapter 3.
So does the so bad with the names here, Kunoros, Hound of Athreos? It's 1 white black 3/3 legendary hound. It's the 3-headed Erebos here. 3/3 vigilance menace lifelink. Creature cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield, and players can't cast spells from graveyards. Does this card do anything for you? I mean, it's kind of like adjacent to some of the life gain stuff we've been talking about, but it's not really. I mean, it's pretty obviously like it's got some hate implications, but it's also just ostensibly a Baneslayer that just,
Oh, I think that there are times, or there at least were times, this would have just been the bee's knees creature. This it's fantastic. It's a 3/3 for 3 with 5 abilities. I think, like, if you're playing, it just kind of depends on context. In Standard, for example, there's not a lot of ways for a red deck to deal 3 that are economical right now, right? So red decks are dealing 2 with Bone Crusher Giants, they're dealing 2 with Shocks, and they're dealing 4 with Slaying Fire sometimes, but not all the time. So this card is actually, if people are going to play red aggro decks in Standard, this card is fantastic. That 3rd toughness is awesome. Vigilance, Menace, Lifelink, I mean, this thing is going to be getting in. If you've got instant speed removal, it's going to be getting in and winning combats, and it's going to be staying back to block, and it's going to be gaining life perhaps multiple times per cycle. I think it's awesome. I think that, like, if you can get it out, it fast enough is a very, context-driven question. Like, how fast do you need to be beating somebody's graveyard? Is this fast enough to be competing with graveyard strategies in Legacy? Probably not. Is this fast enough to be beating graveyard strategies in Pioneer? Maybe. I don't
know. I'm not so sure.
No?
I'm saying the other way. I think that it's not clear to me that this card isn't going to show up in Legacy.
I think this card, it's really context-driven. But
definitely, but it's good enough. I could imagine this card having a home. Like, this the amount of hate from creature cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield and players can't cast spells from graveyards. I can imagine a deck sometime wanting this.
Oh, I completely agree. If I didn't sound enthusiastic about this, let me just revise that. I think this card has strong possibilities. The only thing that I'd say is it's just not a slam dunk, though. Right? Like, there are going to be formats where this card is just like, it costs 3 and it's getting removed consistently with 2 mana, and the opponent who you're supposed to be good against is tempoing you. Right?
Dude, what more do you want in this world than a 3/3 for 3?
I can answer that many different ways.
So there's some other enchantment synergy stuff that's been spoiled so far. Treacherous Blessing is kind of an interesting other side of the enchantment. Like, it could fuel enchantment synergies. It's 2 and a black enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, you draw 3 cards. Its ability, so its primary ability is not that good. Whenever you cast a spell, you lose a life. Its other ability you might not think is good, but given how bad the other ability is, becomes good, which is that whenever Treacherous Blessing becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it.
I just feel like I haven't thought about this card enough yet. Like, I saw this card, I'm like, oh, wow. When Treacherous Blessing enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. If you stop there, 3 mana, 3 cards, and potential enchantment synergies, I'm in. Then the next line is just like, huh. And then the next line is, I had two thoughts on this. One of them is like, oh, I can get out of that second line. And the third one was like, yeah, but do I want to use a spell to do that? Like, this is a confusing card, I think. I don't know. It seems like it certainly doesn't encourage you to use this card to do Stormish type stuff, right? I mean, that would be terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's what you do with it.
It also doesn't seem attractive to me to just, like, as a regular black card drawing spell, like that you would play in an Abzan deck, for example.
Okay, so here's some things you can do with it. First of all, it's pretty good with Cataclysmic Gearhulk, which lets you just sacrifice your enchantments down to 1.
Sure, I got it.
Right. Let's see. It's probably not cost efficient enough, but you could Final Payment is white-black, destroy target creature, and as an additional cost to cast the spell, pay 5 life or sacrifice a creature or enchantment. That's not bad, right?
No, but I feel like I'm playing 2 different substandard cards in order to make them both, like, average cards.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know. This other card isn't necessarily substandard. If its drawback is upside, I mean, clearly 3 mana draw 3 is good, right? So, like, as long as you
it could be good, right? It's not always good. It depends on the speed of the
totally it's good. Are you kidding? Like, just 2 and a black, draw 3 cards. That would be you'd have to at least, like, talk about whether you played in Vintage. It would certainly be Legacy playable.
Yeah, I think it compares very favorably to cards that were played in Abzan decks throughout, like, the entire career of Siege Rhino and Standard, right? Like, there were a variety of cards that you would spend 3 mana to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, and then near the end you would spend 3 mana for 3 cards and 3 life. So I think that before you get to the second and third lines of text, that this card is very favorable when compared with cards like those. And they were all over Standard.
How many ways do you need to sacrifice it that are... I mean, it's not like Final Payment is that substandard of a card, right?
I mean, it could be 0, right? Like, maybe the format is such that drawing 3 cards for 3 mana... I'm implying a Standard format here. Is just so good that you just...
Yeah, but that's not really the world we're going to live in. It would be very unlikely that would be the case.
Yeah.
The question is, how much would you really need? And I think that you might not really need that much, you know? But anyway, I think this is a card to watch. Obviously, the deck is stacked against it, but sometimes this stuff works out.
I think that this card is probably much better than my initial impression.
Does Ephemia, the Cacophony, do anything for you, which is the 2/1 flyer for 2? At the beginning of your end step, you may exile an enchantment card from your graveyard, such as the Treacherous Blessing, if you can somehow get rid of it. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token.
Is that a black creature? Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this card. It's a reasonable on the front end, right? One and a B for a 2-power flying creature is not bad at all, and it has some upside. And depending on the rest of your deck, right? If you've got, I don't know, self-mill, or you're just playing attrition, or I don't know, you have seals or something. Like, imagine you had just like Seal of Fire, for example, right? Like you played like first turn Seal of Fire, and then you used it to kill somebody's creature, and you played Ephemia. Like you had enchantments that went to the graveyard naturally. You'd be getting a lot of upside out of this card, provided it wasn't dead.
Yeah.
I think this card is probably... I think it's probably great. It's one of those cards like...
It's going to be great in decks that you want to actually play it.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I mean, like, obviously, if you have no enchantments, that this card is... It's just a 2/1 flyer for 2, which is
not
bad.
Necessarily nothing. You know, that's...
It's not bad.
We've played 2/1 flying with a drawback in not too distant of past.
I mean, people have played just, I think, on the Pro Tour, people were playing like 2/1 flyer for one in a blue, as recently as 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, but that's even with a drawback, high flying.
Yeah, so I think like this card is probably. I mean, again, you could have enchantment creatures, you can have enchantments go to the graveyard naturally. Even if you're only getting a little bit of upside, like imagine you just do this once, right? You're like 4/3 over 2 bodies for 1 and a B plus flying on one of them. That's kind of great.
So here's another ability. Let's suppose you got Heliod Suncrowned in play. You can put a +1/+1 counter on target enchantment, and the enchantment you're choosing is Treacherous Blessing. That's kind of interesting, right? Because when Treacherous Blessing becomes the target of a spell or ability, so in your Harpy, Treacherous Blessing, Heliod, enchantment deck, whatever, it's kind of interesting. The first time you gain life, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Treacherous Blessing, and then it just goes away.
That's kind of great.
That's what I'm saying. How many ways do you need that are like incidental, right? Because it happens really fast, right? Like the first one, you're not like if you have just like if there's one card that's like an awesome combo, like you take the phone call, you take the meeting, but it would take some events to kind of conspire to make you really be like, oh, this is going to be reliable enough. I can really build a game plan around it. But the second one, if there's actually 2 that are legitimately good, I think the second one that's legitimately good, it's boom, it's a whole deck. Now you have a deck. And I think that rounding it out with cards that are not that short, like Final Payment becomes a reasonable role player if it's legal and it's, whatever. But the point is some of that stuff, once you're going to the trouble, it's not like Final Payment is enough to make you want to play Treacherous Blessing, but stuff like Heliod is. Heliod and Treacherous Blessing seems incredible. And once you're willing to go to that trouble, and plus the Heliod decks are kind of short on ability to smooth their draw anyway, and they're long on life gain. And Treacherous Blessing gives you a way to convert that life into some extra value.
Yeah. I think like you can do some stuff that's like not that fancy and make this card like just pretty fantastic. Ephemia the Cacophony. Like what if we just stayed in reasonably costed black cards and creatures? Timuret Calls the Dead, that new saga. Do you see that one?
Yeah. So this is the 2 and a black. So it's the saga enchantment. Chapter 1, you put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may exile a creature or enchantment from your graveyard, and if you do, you get a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Chapter 2 is the same. Chapter 3, you gain X life and scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. So it's kind of a history of New Benalia. Or History of Benalia, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, it's cool because like it's very History of Benalia on chapters 1 and 2. Then chapter 3 is actually pretty great, right? I think like you have a reasonable expectation to gain at least 2 life in Stry 2, right? Because Timuret Calls the Dead implies that it's going to miss sometimes, right? But this is kind of implying 2 zombies.
Well, and your creatures sometimes die. I mean,
yeah, but it's still, I think that's still in the conversation.
Definitely.
And then I was just thinking, like, Mire Triton, that card that's like 1 and a B for a zombie merfolk 2/1 Death Touch. When Mire Triton enters the battlefield, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard and you gain 2 life. Like, all these kind of cards put together, like, Mire Triton, like, 2/1 for 2/1 Death Touch for 2, gain 2 life. That's okay to me.
You could do worse than that, definitely.
Like, if people are playing, like, big green creatures, for example, I like this card in a format where people are playing big green creatures, right? This is always gonna punch high. It's gonna trade up, and you're gaining.
Not always. Tokens get the better of it.
Oh yeah. 1 toughness is bad, but infinite power for purposes of combat is good. But I like, these cards all put together with Ephemia, the Cacophonies. That seems like a great little shell, and there's more cards I think like that are going to come together. And we see 1, 2. They're all making zombies here.
And remember, Mire's Grasp is really good in a deck like this. So for 2 mana as a removal spell, it's already like a quality rate. But the fact that it's an enchantment in your graveyard means that's an extra 2/2 zombie for the Cacophony.
Yeah, that's fantastic, right? So instead of just being
I think so.
Like a volcanic hammer or whatever that just kills it and then is a sorcery in the graveyard, if you kill it equally dead and then put an enchantment in the graveyard, that's fuel.
Does Erebos Bleak-Hearted do anything for you? This is 5/6 indestructible. You need at least 5 devotion for it to be awake. And whenever another creature you control dies, you may pay 2 life, and if you do, draw a card. And then it has 1 and a B, sacrifice another creature. Target creature gets -2/-1 until end of turn.
I think that this is probably a strong role player, but it's not like some of these other indestructible gods from this set. I'm like, whoa, into it. Like Heliod, where we started, obviously, everybody's into that one, right? I think like Purphoros Bronze-Blooded, I'm thinking hard combo on that guy, right? The new Nylea, I'm thinking, wow, this is a pretty broken ability. Can we cast this in the correct order? Erebos, I'm thinking, you play it in a 2-of in a creature-heavy deck, and it's probably going to win you a lot of games, and it's probably going to be pretty medium the rest of the time.
Yeah, I think you got to really be in for the fact that you're sacrificing, but those bottom 2 abilities are kind of functioning as 1.
Yeah.
That said, I think it'll be solid. I think it'll be I think it'll be a fine card.
Yeah, it's like two of high end in a creature deck, right? That's the role that I'm imagining for this card. Versus like Heliod centerpiece, Purphoros centerpiece, Nylea centerpiece, right? It's just not on the same.
So what are you doing with Nylea?
All right, so Nylea, what is it? It's like the Sharp-Eyed, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
So the new Nylea is 3 and a G for a 5/6 indestructible, and you need green devotion of 5 to turn it on. But it has,
to attack or block.
Yeah, it's attack or block. But it has 2 abilities that are both fantastic. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, right? So it's a medallion for creatures, like, and just for sake of argument, you can go Nylea on 4, however you get to 4, and then you can go to 6 with no real help, just with having Nylea in play. Or you can, if you have like one of those decks that's got like a lot of 2-mana elves, kind of the Paradise Druid or Incubation Druid type, or Growth Chamber Guardians, you can be dropping those cards for G, which is really, really, potentially quite a strong thing, especially if you have the ability to draw additional cards. Oh, wait! Nylea herself is allowing you to do that, because for 2 and a G, you can reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it into your graveyard. This is an extraordinarily efficient ability, right? So you can... I think so.
Doesn't seem extraordinarily efficient to me.
I think, like, the idea that you might want to be putting stuff into your graveyard might be part of the calculus.
That has nothing to do with the calculus for efficiency.
All right.
That might be a thing you want to do, but this card's not efficient, right? Like 4 mana for creature. So to start with, creature spells you cast cost 1 less. That's like definitely not good for 4, right? And then this ability of 2 and a green. How often are you drawing a card with this? 60% of the time?
Well, it clears the top card though, right? So let's.
Wait, if you want, I'm saying 60% of the time you draw a card, 40% of the time you get to surveil 1. That's not very efficient for 3 mana.
I think that I'm imagining Nylea in a deck that's making a lot of mana.
Sure, but I just don't think it's efficient.
Yeah, I think maybe I used the wrong term.
I bet this card is one of the most overrated cards in the set. I'm not even sure it's good.
Yeah?
Maybe it is.
I might be wrong on
sweet.
this one. It seems good.
It looks attractive. Like there's a bunch of things I like. But like if you're spending your mana, sometimes drawing cards, sometimes digging deeper, like it's fine. I bet it's a role player. It's got some things it does. But I don't know, man. Creature spells. I mean, I guess I don't know. If you got this with Heliod and Walking Ballista, yeah.
I mean, at the very least, if you've got one of those green decks that can make infinite mana, this is a pretty good way to finish the game.
So what's up with Purphoros?
Awesome.
So 4 in a red, and you need the 5 devotion as always, you know. But he's a 7/6 if you ever wake him up. Other creatures you control have haste, so he doesn't. However, if he's just been sitting in play, then obviously, you know, no big deal. But his ability is 2 in a red. You may put a red creature card or artifact creature card from your hand onto the battlefield and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step.
So this card is... I hesitate to use the word fixed, but it's like a fixed sneak attack, right? So to get the sneak attack down costs...
Why would you hesitate? It's extremely fixed compared to sneak attack.
Right, so,
it costs 8 instead of 5.
Well, my problem with fixed is if you change the context, I mean, this card might just be a super dominating card for multiple formats. I don't know yet.
What? Like what? In what way? What are you putting into play? What is the red creature card that you're going to play?
Oh, it's red.
Yeah, what is the red creature card that you're going to play, or an artifact creature card? So obviously you're not going to put something like Emrakul or Griselbrand down, right? You're going to put a red creature card or an artifact creature card onto the battlefield. And I'm curious, what is the red creature card or artifact creature card you're going to play that's so sick with this card?
I'll be honest with you, I just was so excited I missed that whole red or artifact thing. And I was just like, ooh, it's sneak attack.
See, are you willing to remove the hesitation around fixed?
I will remove the hesitation around fixed. I think this card is probably still awesome.
What are you going to put into play?
Blightsteel Colossus.
In Modern? That's in Modern. You're going to go Purphoros Blightsteel Colossus?
You don't like Blightsteel Colossus?
For 8 mana? How is this better than Through the Breach?
It's not better than Through the Breach.
I agree. It's not like the problem is that there are no Through the Breaches that are worse than 3. This card seems like a really bad Through the Breach if you're going to use it that way.
Well, if you're just going to compare it just straight up to Through the Breach, it's 3 mana more expensive than Through the Breach for the first Through the Breach, right?
The first, yes. Yeah.
But if you do it more than once...
Yeah, the second one is only 1 more expensive. By the time you've Through the Breached 3 times, you're making a profit.
Well, think about if you're going to go 5 into 6 with this card, right? So if you just assume that you can play this and it's unmolested for 1 turn at 5, which I think, as long as you don't lose the game, is not an unreasonable thing to imagine because it is indestructible. You can go into 6, which is double activations the next turn, potentially turn it on, and, maybe play some really big and powerful creatures.
Like what? There's nothing... Like, You already picked Blightsteel Colossus. That's not even close to good enough for 8 mana. I don't know. Maybe it's okay. I just think that if this card's going to work, you're going to have to do it in a low-powered enough format where 8 mana win the game is actually good.
Do you think that there's big enough red and or artifact creatures in Standard to make this good?
I don't know. There could be. I don't know what they are right now.
I literally just missed the word red.
It's all good. The Storm Herald is a different kind of combo card. 3/2 haste. When it enters the battlefield, return any number of aura cards from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to creatures you control. Exile those auras at the beginning of your next end step. If those auras would leave the battlefield, exile them instead of putting them anywhere else.
Yeah.
So it's a 3/2 haste. So you're not like you don't have to get that much for your 3/2 haste.
Yeah, I mean, there's at least three different things I can think of for Storm Herald. One of them is just it's a 3/2 haste for 3, right? So you just play it in a deck that might want to.
Yeah, that's not going to be good enough,
right? So, but
you got to have something.
It can play cleanup, right? So if you've got a deck that would otherwise want to be putting auras onto its creatures, and those creatures die in combat or they die to mass removal or whatever, like imagine you just had a deck, some kind of, let's make this up, like red-white auras type deck. We've seen similar decks in the past. You play out some creatures, you play out some auras, the creatures die, the opponent taps 5 mana to wrath your team, you play Storm Herald, all of a sudden a bunch of auras start jumping around, and then, hilarity and haste ensue.
You're not going to just use this with Mythic Conscription?
Oh. You mean just get Mythic Conscription into the graveyard and then rock and roll?
Yeah, like if you loot it away in the first 2 turns, and on turn 3 you get them.
That's way more exciting than what I was thinking.
Like that's half their life, right? And then they've also just sacrificed 2 permanents.
What's more than half their life, right?
Yeah.
It's like 13 damage.
That's a big game.
It is also a hard creature to kill.
Well, the conscription goes away at the end of the turn.
Yeah, but when I'm saying it's a hard creature to kill, I mean like the turn that it's going to get you, it gets you. Right? Kill him afterwards. He's already done most of it. I mean, he's done more than 3 mana worth of work at that point.
Yeah. So I could imagine this being good in some kind of a wild combo deck.
There's like reasonable things that you might want to do to like just discard cards that are in red, right?
Totally.
There's that adventure guy, the merchant guy, with haggle. You can haggle one of those, then, there are probably other things that you might want to haggle into the graveyard anyway.
So what about, there's 3, I want to touch on 3 more red cards real quick here. First, Ox of Agonis, 3 red mythic, 4/2. When it enters the battlefield, discard your hand and draw 3 cards. And it has escape of red and exile 8 cards from your graveyard. And it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it. So that's a little weird. But that's not just escape either, I guess, right? Like it escapes with a +1/+1 counter. So the first time you play it, you're spending 5, you get a 4/2, and you discard your hand, draw 3 cards. And from now on, every time you pay 2, because even when it dies, it's not like you only get a second go of it. But every time you pay red and exile 8 cards, you can play this again and get your 5/3 that also discard your hand and draws 3 more cards.
Yeah, this card is a puzzle to me, right? So I think that the real juice here is the escape. Like, 3 RR for a 4/2, even if it's a 4/2, draw 3 cards, right? Like, forget about having any cards in your hand that you had to discard. So I'm just saying, your tidings, I guess it's not tidings.
That's pretty good.
I mean,
no, but you also have a 4/2. It's a 4th card.
Yeah, I guess.
If it was really a 4/2, draw 3 cards, that would be like something to consider.
Yeah, so it's not a slam dunk at 4/2, draw 3 cards at 3 RR, right? And this is on average worse than 4/2, draw 3 cards for 3 RR. However, I think that the escape thing is the exciting part. There's probably going to be decks, and probably not standard, that can get a requisite number of cards into the graveyard where you would be getting a 5/3 for RR with some card drawing upside for like pretty minimal cost to the deck.
I think this card looks incredible in Modern.
Yeah, like
if you're playing some kind of a Modern dredge deck or any of those sort of any of the decks that used to play Faithless Looting, you know?
I was thinking like a Vengevine-ish type deck, like those kind of decks. Getting a 5/3, potentially drawing 3 cards, and then just discarding is actually good in those decks, right?
Definitely.
RR, like that's where the juice on this card is. Like, I mean, 5 mana for the 4/2 with that's cool. I mean, like, I don't know, maybe there's like Jund decks or red control decks in that would just play. I mean, people play Stormbreath Dragons.
I know.
Like,
yeah, but this is not that.
Pyromancer.
This is not that. This is a lot closer to the guy who costs less for every sorcery and instant in your graveyard.
Bedlam Reveler?
Yeah. But I think this card, it's going to have some amount of applications in just any sort of aggressive red deck or red sideboard. But its primary powerhouse is that it's going to be pretty intense in some sort of dredge style decks.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where.
On the note of just endless rebuys, what about the new Yawgmoth's Will? Underworld Breach, 1 in a red. It lets you just start through. Well, so it's an enchantment, but it really functions as sort of a Yawgmoth's Will because at the end of the turn it's going to go away, and it makes it so that each of the non-land cards in your graveyard escape, and they'll escape for their casting cost plus 3, exile 3 cards.
So it's cheaper than a Yawgmoth's Will straight up, right? So Yawgmoth's Will costs 3, this only costs 2. And the escape cost is very similar to what Yawgmoth's Will does, but that additional cost is, wow, it's a lot.
Well, the thing is, this doesn't actually make your cards get exiled other than the ones you're exiling to escape, right? So, like, for instance, you could just play the same card over and over and over again, right?
Oh, if you had like a spell, like let's say for sake of argument you had just like a lightning bolt, right?
Well, I'll give you an example, like Rite of Flame, for instance, or any kind of ritual. If you just played Dark Ritual over and over again, or Desperate Ritual, or whatever, if you just played some sort of a ritual, you can just play it as many times as you can exile cards for it.
Oh, that's cool.
Or if you have some way to continually untap your mana, like if you have a spell that lets you untap all your land, or if you have a card that lets you, for instance, if you had a card that mills yourself for 4 cards, or whatever, 5 cards, anything. Like every 1 mana you spend, if you had a card that was like 1 mana, discard the top 5 cards of your deck, every 1 mana you spend, you could exile 3 cards to mill yourself 5, exile 3 cards, mill yourself 5, and do so as much as you have mana for.
You'd need to do a lot of setup for this card, though. I don't know. I'm very lukewarm on this card, despite what you're saying.
You don't think this card's good in Vintage?
I'm not very good at
who knows
vintage cards. I would have never picked Slash Panther.
Finally, what about Galia of the Endless Dance? Red green legendary satyr, 2/2 haste. Other satyrs you control have +1/+1 in haste, and whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you can discard a card at random. If you do, draw 2 cards.
This card is probably great in decks with no other satyrs.
Looks good,
right?
Like 2/2 haste is not that far off. And if you ever just, when you attack with 3 or more creatures, if you ever trigger this once, discard a card to draw 2, like discard a random card to draw 2 cards is like really good.
Yeah, I think like
that's
you need 0 other satyrs in your red green aggro deck for this card to be pretty good.
I think it's also particularly good in an aggressive deck, where you've played out your creatures and maybe you have extra land or whatever, but if you're not at risk of being stuck with cards in your hand you can't cast, or being stuck at a spot where if you randomly discard a land you're in trouble, then the card goes from good to great.
I think that there's just very subtle things that make this card even more exciting to me, again, even in decks without other satyrs. So the red-green aggro deck in Standard often has a lot of other haste creatures. For example, Questing Beasts or Skargan Hellkites, right? Or Riot creatures that have haste. So you could get into attacking and setting up, 3 creatures on the attack to trigger this ability kind of much more quickly than you might be able to just on average, because there's just so many haste opportunities. And then separately, there are some like exciting new cards that you might want to escape, right? So just randomly discarding an escape card is pretty cool, right? It's very powerful. Especially like if they don't stop your plan A, which is just to smash their face with haste creatures, then having some rebuy out of the graveyard is very welcome, I think, for those kind of decks.
And even when you don't hit the escape card, whatever you discarded being able to be used for escape, it's just clean living.
Oh, that's really cool. I agree. Yeah, I hadn't yet thought about that. That makes perfect sense. So if you think about like Chainweb Arachneer, you seen this one?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this card is such a simple little card. I think that it's pretty exciting, right? So Chainweb Arachneer is G for a 1/2 reach. But when Chainweb Arachneer enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature with flying and opponent controls. So just like for 1 mana, like if the opponent played like, a Terramander or, any number of 2/1 or 1/1 flying creatures for you, it just kills it, right? Also, it doesn't fight it, right? So a Harpooner fights it, right? So a Harpooner might die. A Chainweb Arachneer doesn't die. But then it has this escape, which is 3 GG, exile 4 other cards from your graveyard, and it does the same thing, but it comes back as a 4/6.
A 4/5.
As a 4/5, yes. So
a 4/5 reach, no less.
Yeah, a 4/5
it does 4 damage to something with flying on the way in, which is enough to kill some pretty dope stuff.
Yeah, like it's a Dragon Smasher when it comes back.
And remember, this isn't like a both ways thing either. This is just the one way. It's not like if you hit a torrential, or if you hit a Tempest Djinn or a Dragon or something, they don't get to punch back.
Yeah, like I think this card is, probably sideboard, but it just seems fantastic to me. If you're planning to fight against decks that have any amount of flying creatures, it's just so efficient. It's efficient correctly used in this case.
Yeah, this card is efficient. Definitely. You got to line it up. It's not obviously the most versatile card in the world, but it is quite efficient at what it does. And it does a fair bit,
So this, alongside Birth of Miletus, were my two most exciting cards for the week. I know everybody likes Heliod, but both of these cards I'm just...
I don't know that I like Heliod. I think I might actively dislike Heliod. Oh. However, what is my card of the... I'm going to have to think about it, man. Because at the end of the day, in my heart of hearts, it really is Kunoros, Hound of Athreos.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know, we didn't even get into Treacherous Oracle of Half-Truths. We'll save that for next week.
Oh my gosh, that card is
just
a
jam.
So
great. Tried to play Dredge, it's a jailer, hey. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your Cora trapped in amber stasis, please. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind.